Hello and welcome to another episode of the Viva Bastardo show brought to you by the Hagerty Podcast Network. Today we have Randy Nonnenberg, the founder or co-founder of Bring a Trailer, the car auction website. We have an extraordinary conversation about all sorts of obscure cars, Chrysler LeBaron convertibles, Excaliburs, and other horror shows. So let's get into it. First of all, Randy, I'm impressed you're wearing Bring a Trailer attire.
Oh, this is a one of one. This is a one of one item that I made. This is early.
Did you have it? You had it made. You made it yourself?
No, this is whatever. This is a Dickies jacket with embroidery on it that like some tiny little shop down the street made for us. I think in like 2015, but I'm the only one with one of these, so I love it. It's great.
I'd like to make an all cash offer.
Fantastic. Well, let's go. Everything's for sale, Phil. Everything's for sale.
Well, speaking of which, man, we first encountered each other because you hondeled me into the ground. With your bargaining genius,
I love
man.
Your accent, but honestly, I have no idea what hondeled means. What?
Hondeling.
What the heck is that?
Hondeling is a Yiddish word for negotiating. Like if you're like a hondler or you hondle.
Great. Well, guilty as charged.
So just to explain to everyone else, I was selling my first Lancia Delta Integrale, and you came in on the scene, man, and you just beat me to a pulp of submission. You were off the top rope with the elbow into the balls, the whole thing, man. I still didn't get it cheap enough, did I? You still probably got a pretty good number. I thought I was real nice man. That was being nice.
Wow, I thought I was. Man, you're making me out to be some sort of deal maker. I'm terrible at negotiating.
I feel I'm terrible at negotiating.
Oh, I hate that part of everything. I just give people their number, and I'm just like, just so we don't have to have the awkwardness, but we get on to the next topic.
You know what I do that's really stupid is when I'm selling something, I'll just tell people the number I want, which is so dumb because then you're like, no, you have to start higher because then they're going to say, they're going to hondle you down. And then you have to, so you want 10 grand, so you have to say 15 and then you end at 10 if you're lucky.
No, man, I don't like any of that stuff, but I liked your car and I still like your car. I still own your car. Here we are, 2023. I still got it.
Well, now it's worth millions, man. And think of the provenance.
Yeah, let's go provenance with your name attached, man. And then it drove all over the place with a BaT sticker on the windshield, but nobody knew what that meant. And then, now it's kind of a fixture here. I mean, it was at our last office, parked right in the center, and now we've got different offices, and it made the transition. It's parked downstairs for me right now. I should go drive it.
Is
today.
It still ran when parked? Is that that's what you're saying?
That thing's fantastic. I had to put an engine in it. I had to do an engine because I popped the timing belt and ran all the valves into the cylinders and everything else like we are wont to do on Integrales. It's kind of par for the course, is my understanding. And other than that,
it is par for the course.
The thing has just kept on motoring. I've driven it in the snow. I've driven it all over the place. I think it's fantastic.
Now, did you upgrade the horsepower on that? Because I'll tell you, man, from experience, because that was a stock car. I've since the last one I had, I added like another 60 or 70 horsepower, and it makes a huge difference.
It does until you blow up the gearbox. You blow up your gearbox.
Well, then you got to do the whole thing, man. You got to do the gearbox there. You got to do all of it. You can't just do one bit.
So it's got a little different turbo on it, a couple of little things. It's not a crazy, boosted, over boosted crazy car, but it's fantastic. I love it. I don't want to get rid of it. I'd love to always own one of those. I think they're special.
They are. I mean, and it's funny because every time I actually sold my last one, which is which is kind of criminal. But every time I drove it, I loved it, and there's something about the steering on a Delta Integrale.
You sold the next one after you sold the gray one after mine. That one's gone.
The gray one is gone.
Oh man, you don't. Oh, I didn't know you were moving through them all like this. That one's gone too.
Only because I got the Lancia 037.
Okay.
And then, are you texting your wife and saying, I just got to finish up with this 10 minutes with this English guy and I'm done?
No, I'm fidgeting. I'm fidgeting. My phone's over here.
I thought, for a minute, you held that up and I thought it was a BlackBerry or a pager.
No. Sorry, it's a coaster. I'm just fidgeting with things on the table here. But it's got Laguna Seca on it. It's a dream coaster with Laguna Seca on it. I'll keep my hands where you can see them.
Okay. Please, at all times, sir.
Yeah.
At all times. So, I was reading about the origin story that you've told endless amounts of times about Bring a Trailer. That you and I feel like everyone who's into cars did what you did, but you were smart enough, or you had a friend who was smart enough to say, hey, maybe you should turn this peculiar obsession into something that's real. But the idea of, like endlessly, I do that. My friends are endlessly always looking for cars, but never actually buying them. There's something about the joy of finding the right car. Like you're looking for this car, it's the right spec, and you kind of tipped up to the edge, but then you don't have to buy it. And not buying it provides a certain joy in and of itself.
As long as you're not that person that hounds the seller and gets all the data and starts doing all this stuff, starts asking questions, and then says, "Oh, I don't have any money anyway. I'm not going to buy the car anyway."
Please, if you could send, no. They have to. You can't make contact. That is a breach of code. You can't make contact with the seller. You can do all the research around the car, find his posts in the forums, look for pictures, all that stuff. And then I realized there's another level of perversity to people who do that. And I have friends who do this. They will look at want ads and classifieds from the 70s.
That's just painful, right? I mean, you just look. It's like all the things you missed out on. It's like looking at pictures of people you dated when you're in high school and like wondering what would have happened. It's just, don't even do it. It's just torment. Yeah. Like why go down that road? Like must be some. It is.
But it's like a sadomasochist kink. Like it's the most exquisite pain. Like, look at this GTO for $15,000.
Yeah, those are crazy. But it's entertaining that they even put those together in the way they did back then. I was joking with somebody that the listings back then had your phone number and your address. And you basically trusted anybody reading this magazine not to come and break into your garage and take your, Ferrari V12 out of there, it's really funny how they used to write those listings. But at some point, and maybe this is true for you, you say it's true for a lot of other people, ads and looking at ads and the prospect that the vehicle was for sale at that exact moment became more compelling than car magazine content. And, you can watch YouTube videos to your heart's content these days, but there's something more interesting about, oh, wow, like this one could be mine the end of this week if I wanted it to. It makes it more electric and more interesting.
That's exactly right. It's the possibility. Mm-hmm. It's the possibility of it becoming more than a fantasy.
Mm-hmm. And so people hunt around. I mean, why am I on Craigslist last night looking at wheels and tires and like stuff I don't really need it. I mean, I kind of need it, but I don't really need it. But I'm hunting around for that when I ought to be, I don't know, exercising or doing something useful,
What are you looking for?
Oh, I mean, I'm always just hunting endlessly. I mean, the fact that BAT has gone bananas has not changed my sort of DNA, which is that I'm always poking around and hunting around for my same search terms, cars of my youth, trucks of my youth. And now I have, 6 or 8 cars in the fleet, and they all need parts and they all need upgrades and they all need, what if I found the perfect set of seats for the blah, blah, blah? What if somebody has a set of,
what if?
Yeah. So I go hunt around all over the place. And a lot of people do that.
We're essentially like a step above truffle pigs.
Is that good news or bad news? I don't know.
I think it's good news, man.
Mud? Is that what you're saying? Just
you're rooting around in the forest for you want to unearth a thing. I mean, so what are the 6 to 8 cars that you have that are stuffed in the Nonnenberg underground bunker?
Yeah, well, I mean, thankfully some of them are here at BAT, and then I have them scattered around in different places. But as you know from BAT's early days and from talking to me, my tastes are like, a million miles wide. I'm all over the map, just like the website is. And I get a lot of joy out of that. Like single mark car shows are kind of my nemesis. I get bored very quickly at those. I like to see things like in the racing paddock where it's all the brands battling against one another and everybody does it a little bit differently. And seeing a Datsun race against a Porsche is really invigorating. So so I've ended up with all sorts of weird stuff. Obviously, I have the Lancia Delta that you're talking about, and a couple other things in that genre, since they were
you have the R5 Turbo.
R5 Turbo,
which I love. I've always loved that car.
I'm surprised you've never had a Renault.
No, I've tiptoed up to it on numerous occasions. Yours is the Series 2 or the Mental Interior Series 1?
No, I have the Mellow Interior, but it's an 8221 car. It's an aluminum roof homologation car. Okay. So it's a Turbo 2, the 85, the later ones. But it's a good car.
What's it like to drive?
It's a fun car. It kind of feels like it wants to kill you most of the time, which is good, right? Which is common in that sort of era. But it has a good boost. But the engine placement and the sound of the turbo, it has very little exhaust sound, but it has a lot of turbo sound. And hearing that can be intoxicating as you're driving and having fun. But then if your mind ever goes back to the fact that, the steering column and the windshield and the doors and everything are just off a little Renault 5 Econobox, piece of junk, it's kind of scary to get that car going 100 miles an hour or whatever on that sort of a chassis and basis. But it gives you a lot of respect for people that drive them fast. I've only tried to drive it fast and keep up with my buddies on a couple of long sort of twisty drives, and it takes your life in your hand.
Are you a good driver?
I'm an average driver. I'm a terrible racetrack driver. I'm not fast because I am averse.
You're terrified?
Well, I'm averse to smashing whatever I'm driving, whether I borrowed it or it's my own. I think I'm just a miserable racing driver just because every time I've been on track, people say, you can go a lot faster. And I was like, yeah, but I don't need to go faster. I'm enjoying myself. I'm kind of cruising, but I like hustling on windy mountain roads. The things that inspire me driving wise are early days rally footage when rally cars were just street cars that people put numbers on and drove kind of fast, like 50s and 60s rally Monte Carlo type stuff, when the cars were just really substantially similar to a street car that you just, maybe put a set of tires on or pull the hubcaps off and drove fast. So I like to go do that kind of driving, but good driver,
what about,
I don't think so.
I am quite possibly the most uncoordinated human being that's ever existed. Like the heel and toe thing, I'm always out of sync. But going back to the thing you mentioned about videos or footage from the 50s and 60s rally stuff, this thing for me I've always loved is the Group B rally footage. When you see like these tiny roads lined with people all kind of reaching out as the cars go by, try and touch it, like some sort of like elaborate mechanical bullfighting situation. I mean, that to me. Go on. Sorry, I just ran. That was the end of my story.
No,
it was going to go somewhere, and then it went nowhere.
You left me hanging right there. You said that to me, and I was waiting for
and then I thought you were
kicker.
going to. I thought you were going to interject, man, with a gem of wisdom.
Well, I think that footage is like the mountaintop, right? I mean, nobody should think that they can ever go recreate that, and that all those series were canceled for safety reasons and everything else, and it was madness. But yeah, you watch the guy with the Adidas driving boots that's like on all the pedals and it's going 1,000,000 miles an hour. I mean, people set that to techno music now and just watch it to be mesmerized. I don't know if it was Walter Merle or who was doing that, but
I think it was Walter Merle.
Yeah, it's just totally crazy. And that stuff is, I know my limits, and that is way beyond limits of whatever I could do to sort of ballet dance with a Group B rally car. But driving the street versions of the Group B cars, like the ones I have and the ones you have, those are fun, and you can drive them somewhat fast. But I don't have fantasies of flying over some crest into a crowd of splitting the ocean of people in front of me and being the hero and getting the trophy.
It's like a full Moses situation,
yes.
Like the sea parts and you.
It's crazy. That stuff is crazy, and I love it. But I think I'm a little closer to reality on that sort of stuff, which is mountain roads and a little bit of squealing tires, but not much.
What kind of Group B cars do you have?
Well, these cars that we just mentioned, I mean, I kind of rolled those up into pre-Group B, and then Integrale was right after it, I guess.
Sure.
So I don't know if anything qualifies as, I mean, I've never owned an RS200 or the fancy, you talk about your 037 and, the king of the heap for me is the, Rothman's 959, and all those sort of cars are wonderful. Right. But how usable are they on the, those are full on amazing race cars that take a
I will actually say, they actually don't require any stuff, man. The street versions of those
street
cars
versions are okay, yeah.
Yeah, they were, I never had any problems. I mean, I remember being in traffic for like 3 hours in the 037 in New York, just until it eventually died on the side of the road because the alternator died. But the car itself was fine. But but
did you have a Delta S4? You had one of those, right? I mean, you opened the rear clamshell of that. I mean, I don't have any business anywhere near that. And, supercharged, turbocharged. Were you able to keep that thing running, or you got rid of that?
Yeah, No, it's fine, man. I mean,
fine, give me a break, fine. You know,
no,
it's like
I swear,
guy,
man, I swear.
It's like rich guy, fine, right? It's like
I have a staff of millions who attend the car.
Yeah, fine.
When I step out of the car, like 15 guys come out of the woodwork to like check.
I don't know if it was yours or whose it was or what color yours was, but a guy showed up at a BaT alumni gathering at the Peterson Museum in LA with a Delta S4, and it was silver. It was beautiful.
I know that guy.
You know the car. He pops open the rear of that thing, and I just sit there, you know, wonderfully just shaking my head like this is.
Oh, I mean,
bananas.
it's amazing, man. It's all like all Apollo 11 under there.
Yes,
you know, like it's all like rocket liquid fuel rocket boosters and I don't know. No, I swear, man. When I bought the car in Japan. Had it shipped over here, and it was like firing like bits of catalytic converter out of the exhaust. It was all just not working. So it turned out that it had never really run properly in Japan because when they brought it over there from new, they put in some Japanese ECU that was conformed to Japanese emissions, but then the car never ran properly.
So
I picked up an ECU. Yeah, so I picked up an ECU at the local AutoZone, and it was fine.
Okay, at the local AutoZone, yeah, right. Sure,
off the shelf, man. Great. It was like $12.
Well, I mean, I respect those cars. I highly respect those cars, but I kind of know when to draw the line. But that's a fabulous model. It's amazing you got to own that and drive it around a little bit.
It was like driving around in Satan's anus.
Wow, fantastic!
it was really loud, and it would.
I have no data point for that. I don't know how to respond to that, but that sounds interesting.
Because it was incredibly loud. It was actually very linear because supercharged, turbocharged. So there wasn't the crazy turbo lag of other stuff that you and I have owned. Mm-hmm. So it was pretty easy. I mean, I will say the 037 is in a way much more enjoyable to drive.
Cool. I've never even sat in one of those. I've seen a few of them. I've never sat or driven in one of those. So I'll have to come out to you.
You should, man.
Mm-hmm.
You should.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested. There was a tipping point for Bring a Trailer when you kind of were selling regular stuff, and then suddenly you weren't selling regular stuff. You were selling insane shit. And what do you remember when and what that was and all of it? I remember so often, like, you know, I might be selling a car and it would never occur to me at that time to put on Bring a Trailer because it seemed that it was very specifically for up to a certain level of car. And then at some point it jumped the shark, and it became and now you sell all manner of lunacy.
Yeah, I love this conversation because there's always been, or certainly was in the early days, what is a Bring a Trailer car debate.
That's right.
And people would jump in the comments when we'd list something that was either too fancy or too mainstream or too whatever, and say this isn't a Bring a Trailer car, and like a brawl would ensue between people saying, no, you know, there's like the freedom of speech guy that's like, Randy can put whatever he wants on his website, and then there's the guy that's like, but not this car because I hate this car, right? And then somebody says, well, this is a rich guy car, you know, this is an everyman site. You can't do that, you know, all this can. And I would just I would just sit back with my arms folded and just like watching all this ensue, and they argue over what's allowed on our own website where we can put anything we want effectively, right? So it's kind of just fun. People, but they had such strong opinions about what is a Bring a Trailer car. And then the sales sort of auction model started to evolve and change that and created the phenomenon you're talking about, which is like, you know, 7-figure cars are there consistently now. But in the early days, it was a little bit more like, oh, that car's only 15 years old. That's too new for Bring a Trailer. You can't put that on Bring a Trailer, right? And there was this friction. It was interesting.
It's funny because the way I saw it was not that you couldn't put it on or it was too new or whatever it was. It just I felt like the demographic wouldn't support the number that car would require.
Yep.
And I was obviously totally wrong. And now I must say, man, it's such a joy to see like any car I happen to own that goes on Bring It. Like you had an M1 the other day, the same spec as mine, and I was watching it eagerly to see what it goes for because and you know how like anyone who owns a car, the moment the car goes for any kind of high price, like, right, that's what mine is worth.
Yep. And people jump in, I'm adjusting my insurance policy, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Right. And it's like, okay, great. Go do that. Right. But I mean, one data point doesn't always, you know, change the entire market. Right. I remember the first Toyota 2000 GT. Somebody paid $1 million for a Toyota 2000 GT,
Right.
whatever, 3-4 years ago. And everybody who had one of those all of a sudden submitted them and wanted to sell them for $1 million. And we're like, look, folks, that doesn't mean everybody's is worth that because one sold for that at auction.
Right.
So it ebbs and it flows, but the upward pressure on what is viable to sell both online overall, like forget bring a trailer, like what can you sell online? Can you sell $1 million Ferrari online? And the answer to that was no for a long time. There was a lot of skepticism to that for a long time. When we turned on auctions in 2014, a lot of people just immediately that day were, oh, we don't need another auction. This is never going to work. You guys are just in it for the money, blah, 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 all these sort of narratives of negativity, right? And then we just kept...
The internet is so supportive.
Yeah, right. But we had supporters, but man, we had plenty of detractors too. But just gentle pressure for days and weeks and years. And eventually it reached a point where, people would take a risk. A seller would take a risk and list a 500, 600K car on BaT to see what would happen. It takes a special kind of DNA and ownership to do that. A lot of people aren't willing to test it.
I mean, it's true because there's. Do you remember what that car was? The first car that was like a big car.
I mean, we had a 959 that missed reserve, and then we had a 300 SL, not a going, a roadster, a white roadster by this longtime BaT member who was like, I'm going to try it, right? And in our early days, it's almost laughable now, but the Mercedes broke the website, right? It was one of those deals where like it got so crazy, the site went dark with 30 seconds left, and everybody's panicking on our end and everywhere. So that one missed reserve. And then Bill Noon out of Symbolic listed a silver 959, which at the time, I think he only wanted, $800K for it or whatever, saying only because now they double that or 3 times that or whatever. Sure. But it missed reserve. It got like right up to it and it missed reserve. And we were like, oh, we're devastated. And now, I mean, if you'd offer anybody a 959 for $800,000, they'd snap it up, So things have evolved. But those were two of the early risk takers.
It is. It's funny because I guess there's the fear on the part of the seller that you don't want to burn your car. Like you put it up there, and then also you're in a way. I mean, obviously you know this, but the kind of the weapons grade power of the mob is it's kind of like the comment section, sort of like the angry villagers outside Frankenstein's castle with the flickering torches, but in a good way. I mean that in a good way, because what happens is it's reassuring. Like if you want to buy a car, you've got like 1 million people. There's of all the people commenting, there's always like half a dozen of whom their entire lives have focused around look this particular car. That's all they think about. That's all they talk about to everyone they know. So when that car comes up for auction, they know everything about it. Mm-hmm. So for me, that provides comfort if you're a buyer.
Absolutely. That's what has aided in the transparency and the reliability of the marketplace. And that's what people didn't think there could be on the internet, right? And you really have to craft that and encourage that and let people, go over the line a little bit sometimes before you reel them back in, right? You can't just have a muzzle on it. There are communities online where people just have a super tight, muzzle on what people are allowed to say, and they can't say anything. They can't say anything negative, because if you say anything negative, you're detrimental, blah, 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 blah. And we've gotten, many opinions on how we should control the conversation or not. And we are involved in the conversation, but you can't, shut people down completely. Or the next time they have something contributive to say, something either positive or just helpful, they won't say it because you kicked them out because they said one negative thing. So there's this balance and this dance you do with the entire community, and it's so hard.
Well, what's lovely is you allow a certain degree of banter. I actually was commenting. You were selling a De Tomaso Guerra Barchetta the other day.
Love it.
And I commented on it. Oh no! Wait, it was the Pajero I commented on, and someone commented on my comment. There goes the neighborhood.
Yeah,
which I really love, man. I mean, that's really funny.
Some of them are funny, but as you know, humor lands different on different folks, right? Whether it's a text, especially in anonymous text form. If you get a text message your buddy thought was really funny and you didn't, like, it could be fists the next time you see them. So it's like it's tricky to balance that, but I think there are many comments that are just sort of harmless, right? And obviously we have to have some guardrails. If somebody says, hey, I know Mr. Toledano, and here's his social security number and what I think of him, and blah blah blah. I mean, some stuff just cannot be allowed, and so a free for all is not the goal either. So that's what I mean, that there's this balance, and we worked hard over the years to try to make it just a place where people who know their stuff want to share it and point it out, and that is different than a lot of other marketplaces, right? But it's worked for us.
It's the one thing that makes you really amazing, I think. It's actually there's a couple of interesting things. One of the other things I find from a psychology point of view that's really interesting is that thing when do you know what I'm going to say?
I don't, but there's many. So what do you got? What's your favorite?
What do you got, kid? When the auction gets down to a certain amount of time and then someone bids, it flips back. Like, is it 2 minutes or something?
And what does your blood pressure do? What does your blood pressure do when it does that?
Right. Well, I mean, I'm not bidding on a car, but I can only imagine, man, if I was bidding on a car, I would be like, popping whatever, like blood pressure pills, and then also, I mean, it's kind of genius though, the way that works. How did that idea happen? Do you have like a team of crack psychologists coming and go, now look here, Randy?
Well, that idea was elsewhere on the internet. We don't claim to have invented it. It wasn't really used on car auctions, right? All people could really equate online car auctions to was eBay, who still to this day doesn't extend the time. It's like a rifle shot at the end, and you either get in or you don't. We wanted to more closely replicate an actual, like if you're in the tent at a Gooding auction and somebody puts in a bid, like it keeps going, right? And it's that psychology of it. It's like baseball, right? It could technically go on forever. There's no clock, right? But eventually people come to their senses and things end, things resolve, or somebody relents and it ends. Right. So it's, but it's that sort of replication of there are some good things about physical auctions that we really like. And the psychology is actually positive on it and how it works. And so we wanted to replicate that. So that's where that idea came for adding that component to BAT. But I think it existed in there's crazy auctions across the internet of coins and collectibles and estate sales and like weird stuff that people were trying to innovate around online even before 2014. So we don't claim to have invented that particular component, but we thought it was a good one to add.
What other kind of neat little psychological tricks can you reveal part of BAT?
Yeah, they're kind of tricks, or they're kind of just. I mean, auction is just really. We knew for a long time that auction is the best way to sell an individual, special, rare thing. Just because I hate, to your point earlier about pricing and negotiation. Like I would rather bid something up than go in at a number and come in at a lower number and whittle somebody down or get whittled down myself, or like that whole going downward till you hit the price dynamic always bothered me. And the start at $1 and go till it stops is so much sort of purer in its psychology. So auction, we always knew was a great way to be able to get to the right price, because before we did BAT auctions, we did what we called BAT exclusive listings, which is like a classified listing, and you could list your Integrale for $58,000 or best offer, and then like 100 people will email you, and you'll have this like crazy kind of an auction you're running on your own, which is right. One other way to do it. But man, we would argue with the sellers about what price they could put, and then it would either be feast or famine, and it was so inefficient. It was like, we can't wait till we can have an auction functionality. So it took us some years to build it and do it. But we kind of look back and laugh at those rudimentary years now, where people just argued amongst themselves about what the price should be. It's like, instead of all this arguing, why don't you just bid on it and
let the market speak?
Yes, correct.
The curating thing must be interesting. When are you going to have an Excalibur up there? That's what I want to know.
Oh my goodness, I think we have. I don't know if you saw at the end of the
you have one.
Not right now, but I'll have to pull it up here. At the end of the year, we do voting for the best listing of the year, and we do voting for the best photo gallery of the year. And in doing that, one of the cars, I think, was an Excalibur. I think it was in the running, and I detest those. I don't like those at all. I don't want to ride in one. I don't want to own one. I don't need one.
Randy, come now, sir.
Have I offended
I've
you?
got I've got 12. I'm the foremost
gosh.
Excalibur collector of the country.
Yeah. Here goes.
They are utterly fascinating. I'm just intrigued by the idea of how they came to. And wasn't it Zimmerman or something? There was like a whole bunch of different companies that were making
Zimmer, Quicksilver. All these weird cars. Hold on, I'm going to search this.
You
right
seem
now.
to know an awful lot about them, Randy.
Well, they come in the door, and we need to know what to tell those people and know how to talk to those people. And it's not always straightforward.
How does that curation work then? I mean, do people in the office sit around go and vote on it, or are there specific cars? Like, for instance, you will never allow like a Chrysler LeBaron convertible with the woody panels.
We've had them. The crazy part, again, back to the like what is to bring a trailer car, right? It kind of gets to the core of that, and some of that.
What I would say, what is not. What is not a bring?
Absolutely, but now where I was going with that is, it used to be me at the beginning, one man show, and then we added Howard Swig. Have you ever met Howard? I think maybe you've interacted with him, but anyway,
maybe.
he's on the team here, and he leads that, and now it's 3 or 4 folks that do curation exclusively. I mean, we get so many cars coming in, right? I mean, when you're doing 100 auctions a day, and we're getting 300 a day. And you got to go through all these and have a point of view. And sometimes it's a judgment call. Sometimes it's a piece of cake. A Phil car rolls in the door and in a garage.
Forget it.
Yes. It's like a rubber stamp. Yes. VIP. But or an M1, like you're talking about, I mean, really special stuff. It's like, let's figure out a way, as long as their reserve isn't totally crazy. And the curation is tricky because it's multifaceted. There's the car, there's the price, and then there's the seller, because we're kind of selling the seller as well, right? Like if the car is great and the reserve is great, but this person is a liar or is terrible or has a bad reputation or is going to abuse whoever buys it by, being just a miserable person to deal with. We reject cars based on that, which is a shame.
How do you know? How do you know if someone's miserable?
Man, some people are out of the gates and in half a second, right? Even over email. Right. Some people we've dealt with before and we need to, work with them going back and forth. And so we have an interaction. I mean, a human fields every vehicle that comes into BAT and has a dialogue back and forth with the seller. So a lot is revealed in that. Like there's no computer algorithm to say whether, this person's terrible or not. We just have to interact with them. And thankfully our judgment works most of the time, right? We're not perfect, but we vet for that sort of stuff. But then it comes to quality of the car, and are there any cars we absolutely won't take, or what kind of things are we looking for? I think there's an Aztec on the site right now. You say that. I mean, what's so funny, right?
This is genius. I actually kind of love it, man. I kind of love it. You should have. Really why don't you have like a? You should have like a guest. Can I come on and guest curate? Like, you know what? We should do guest curations. I'm giving you, these are $1 million ideas, Randy.
These are huge ideas. Maybe we can be a success with some of these ideas. We'll see what we can do.
My ideas and this podcast could finally give you your lucky break.
That's what we're looking for.
And bring BAT, make BAT into,
the next century. We need it.
Man.
I like the ideas.
But you need some visibility. I'm just trying to help out a small struggling company, Randy. From the largesse of my own heart. You know what I would do? I would do an Isuzu V-Cross.
Okay, we've had one of those, by the way. Yellow.
I would do a Volvo 262 Bertone
with the chopped looking roof. The two-door with the chopped roof. Yeah.
What else I do? What else I do? I might do a Subaru SVX. Is that the one with the little window?
The window within the window. It had a flat 6 in it, I think, and those were very, very weird. They all came with automatic in the US, but we've featured ones that are manual swapped, which is kind of a hot setup.
See, that's what I would love.
There you go.
You know what car? If one comes across the door, can you just kind of like slide it my way instead of putting up on? I know you can't really say yes. I want a mid-90s, like a 95 Volvo T5R wagon in yellow.
You want the yellow color? Okay, cool. No, we've had some of those. A lot more sedans, but the wagon is the special one, I think. It's really hard to find those with super low miles. Do you know how some of these cars come out of the woodwork? An NSX will come out of the woodwork, or a Integra Type R will come out of the woodwork with really low miles. All Integrales have low miles because just nobody drove them that much. But cars like a Volvo like that typically they have huge miles on them, and they have 130,000. And you're like, man, if we could just find a yellow T5R wagon with 10,000 miles somewhere, I'm kind of convinced it doesn't exist, but I'd love it if it did, because it would go crazy on BAT.
That would be I feel like that would be $100,000.
Absolutely. I think it absolutely would. And people will shake their heads at that. But I think, we've gone years now, right? And so before I used to just say like cars are hard to find, but now I can genuinely say like, we haven't featured one of those in 8 years of looking for one of those, and we would do it. And so the best one we found is permanent, and it's on the website. And I think it had 90 or 100,000 miles on it. But if you could find one that was like an in the wrapper T5R stick, original, not smashed, not repainted yellow wagon, I think it'd bring a whole bunch of money. But Volvo, the Volvo market's weird though, man. I don't know if you follow that sort of stuff. I mean,
I don't follow it. Why is it weird?
It's just I don't know. It's like an enthusiast brand, but it's not an enthusiast brand, right? And it's the early ones like 123 GTs and some special Volvos like that are interesting and can bring some money. But in general, Volvos just hover around a low price most of the time. And it really takes some sort of special ones to bring out a pocketbook or a collector or somebody who's really nuts for a certain model. So I want a Tom Walkinshaw, white and blue BTCC wagon, right? I mean, those cars are spectacular. Right. I don't even know where the real ones are, if they still exist anymore. But that there's like these rare sort of nuggets within Volvo where you can find really special ones. And would people pay up for those? I think they would to some degree, but most of them just hover around a sort of fun, attainable, indestructible sort of a fun event car.
What's your guilty pleasure car that you feel slightly embarrassed telling people that you'd like to have?
Oh man,
do you have one?
Yeah,
or is it a long list?
No, I mean it is a long list. I don't know. Some people. Oh man, embarrassing.
It's
ones.
a LeBaron. Is it LeBaron convertible?
No, but I'm like I told you, I'm all over the place. So what most often happens is it's not embarrassing, but I'll tell people something that I like, and they'll just have sort of a blank stare, right? Like I tell like Porsche people, they're like, "Hey, what'd you buy lately, Randy?" And I was like, "Well, I bought a '72 GMC 4x4," and they're like, what? Like, why would you?
Yeah, but those are kind of beautifully rectangular and like, and they're also small.
Like my favorite.
They're also they're small, right? Those cars.
Well, no, mine's a Sierra Grande. Mine's a like huge pickup truck that's like as big as a house, right? So that is unbelievable, and I love it, right? But I get as excited about that as I do about a McLaren or some special sports car. So it's funny. I don't have any that I'm too embarrassed by, but I do feel like different audiences. The variety that I'm excited about isn't everybody's variety, right? So, so to show up at a certain event and it's like, what's Randy bringing? It's like, oh, weird. He brought like a '87 BMW 535 IS, right? Which I think is a spectacular car. But like guys showing up in $100,000 cars are like, that's like a piece of junk. Like, why are you showing up in that? And I'm like, I love it. I can go on for days and days and days about how the design is important and it's beautiful and it drives well and rear wheel drive and blah, blah, blah. And then you tell that to my neighbor who drives in modern, like, RS Audi, and he's like, why are you, dude, you're like, are you driving an old piece of junk, right? And I was like, oh, it's not. It's fabulous.
I'm actually the same way, man. I'm actually kind of bored. I'm not that interested in seeing like a Ferrari, 250 short wheelbase. I don't care that much. Because I feel like I've seen so much stuff that I get really excited by the weird shit.
Mm-hmm. Here's one. So I went out and bought on eBay, bought a 92 GTI 16 valve Volkswagen, right?
Oh, those are great.
I actually love it, right? But I mean, I bought it for $9,200 or whatever, right? And I'm super excited about it. And I've put a little bit into it, and it's cleaned up, and it's special to me because they're all gone, and you never see them in nice shape. We've only listed maybe 3 or 4 really good ones on BAT over all the years because they're not around. So is that an embarrassing car? I mean, but like my wife doesn't want to go to dinner in a GTI from 92, right? And like my buddies, like I pull up in that car and they're kind of like, okay, that's Randy's weird, like quirky project. I guess he's.
I love that car, man.
I love it. I love it.
I love those. My first car was a Mark I GTI because I couldn't afford to buy like this was it was an 84. I bought it in like 90. Because my friend who, he was a count. He was an Austrian count.
Wow.
He had the 16 valve. And I drove it. And it just completely depressed me. But I love those cars. You know what else I love is the Corrado.
That sort of stuff. So great. I love all of those, right? And a lot of us our age sort of have stories about people who had those back in the day and the marketing for those and the way they were put together, right? And anyway, is that embarrassing? No, it's not embarrassing. Is it expected? Not to most people. Most people are like, oh, you're into cars. You must like Porsches and you must like, Ferraris and fancy stuff. And I'm kind of like, the best buy for me of the last couple of years was nabbing that GTI because there hasn't been another good one since, in my opinion. It's white. It's got the original BBSs on it. The interior's nice. Like you just never find them. And you ask me what I'm searching for at night. I'm just searching for this sort of weird esoteric stuff. And when I see it, I'll know, It
must be actually very interesting, man, because from being at BaT, you must have this unique kind of aerial view of things that should be commonplace but aren't. There's the New York Bird song.
I was going to say, is that my side or your side? That sounds like New York.
That's your ride.
Things that should be common but aren't. Yeah,
like the 16 valve, like that should be a car. There should be a shitload of those cars, right? But they're kind of weirdly there aren't.
They faded away, or people modified them, or they were fun, right? And so fun cars back then a lot of these were fairly cheap, and so they got manhandled or they got crashed, right? I mean, you can probably I can list off, it takes more than one hand to list the number of friends that crashed 5-liter Mustangs in high school, right? They just all got crashed and painted and repainted and salvaged and everything else. So, I mean, they were great, and there's a lot of nostalgia around them, but a lot of the good ones are gone. So then when a good one appears on BaT and is, strategically placed in front of a bunch of bidders at the right time, it tends to go a little bit crazy. And then people say, wow, is somebody really going to pay that for a car that had 125 horsepower, a GTI from the factory? And people go crazy for it.
Yeah, but the reason for that is because that's a main line directly to nostalgia. The person who buys that car is the person who had one of those cars in college and they loved it and they never saw it again and they missed that. And when you're mainlining nostalgia, you will pay stupid amounts of cash.
I agree. So we see it all the time on BaT, and sometimes it's a healthy thing, and sometimes it may not be. But I think that in general, I mean, when I sit in those cars, I don't know how you put a price on those sort of feelings, right? I mean, it's like my sister had GTIs and I never got to drive it, and now I got one. I get to drive it, and nobody can tell me what to do or where to drive it or when to go. And it's like now I make the rules, And that cost me $9,000 to do that. I was like, I'd take that deal all day. I mean, it's a great item.
When you said you strategically place, what does strategically placing a car mean for BaT? Like, is there a particular, are there times of the day and particular days where for some reason people are more rabid about things than other times, or it doesn't really matter?
There's multiple ways to answer that question. So there's kind of layers to it. And the cool part is that a lot of people think that just like, oh, you just pop your car on BaT, right? You just put it in the system and the computer churns out a listing and it's live that afternoon or whatever. And we put a lot of thought. Our team, it used to be the curation team, and now it's a whole separate team that does just the sort of scheduling and organization of, because at this sort of number, I mean, man, we look back, it was so easy to do, 10 and 20 and 30 of these a week, but you try to do 800 of them a week, and you got to put some thought into it. So we don't want to have you list your super special car and then the exact same spec, exact same car, 10 miles from you gets listed at the exact same time. That's sort of not great for the seller and buyer experience. So there's overlap dynamics that we think about. There's some seasonality, right? Like not as much as you would think. A lot of people think like winter is a bad time to sell a car. Like we had amazing results the 2 weeks before Christmas, just this last holiday. We had like banner results happening. So it's people are doing their Christmas shopping, and sure, they're busy, but people like you and me will make time when the right car is up on BaT. Right. People will orient their schedule around making sure they make some bids. So
there is always time to spend 80 grand on the car you don't need.
You have time. You can make time to make that happen, right?
That's right.
To the whatever room in your house, no one's going to bother you, and you
go into the bathroom, man.
Those little deals, yeah, all the tricks.
You're at family dinner. You nip into the toilet. It's urgent. I have IBS. You have to lay the groundwork with an IBS story, so then you can go in there repeatedly.
Bitter syndrome by BS, right? Bitter syndrome. So anyway,
yeah, that's right.
It's pretty funny, but we do some sort of quirky seasonality, right? Like boats don't sell super great in the winter, and snow machines don't sell particularly well in the summer, right? Like weird stuff like that. But honestly, it's kind of surprising to a lot of people. But a Ferrari 308 GTS, the market is as strong for that on December 22nd as it is on June 22nd. And you may not think that it is, but the data and the sales results show that the seasonality around buying, special cars and that sort of stuff is not really different.
But that makes perfect sense to me, man. I mean, if you think about it, like if you're looking for a 308 in a particular, you will buy the right one the moment you see it. It doesn't matter when it is. As the data, I'm so interested in has the data revealed anything surprising? Can you think of like the most surprising thing you must have reams of data about all this stuff. Is there anything really that you did unexpected?
I mean, the results obviously have been unexpected. How many people rally around particular cars and models, right? And the most viewed listings on BaT, like you'd get a kick out of this, right? You talk about unusual stuff, like how short wheelbases are boring now, and like the most eyeballs on any listing of all time, the one that totally like blew the website apart in terms of how much visibility is like for a restored travel trailer that you would tow like from the 50s that was all redone and sold for $600,000 or something crazy. But you'd think like, oh, it must be a Ferrari Enzo or something very predictable, right? But it's not at all. It's like and then I think the second or the third is a military tank got the most views,
really?
Right? Yeah. So you can search. You can search on BaT. It's all very transparent. You can dig around if you're a data geek because you can sort by most popular, and that is eyeball count. And the top list of top 5 things, you'd think it would be, whatever, Carrera GT followed by a, I don't know, Porsche Speedster followed by a Shelby Mustang or whatever. And it's quite the opposite. It's like bizarro, weird stuff where the discussion gets going and some interesting figure or expert drops in some information and then everybody dialogues about it, and those get to hundreds of thousands of eyeballs on them. And
it's so interesting.
Unusual.
I was talking to this guy called Johnny Smith for an earlier podcast. He's a very successful YouTuber in England. He has a show called The Late Break Show. And his most successful video on YouTube is his restoration of a British Leyland car from the 1970s called an Austin Allegro, which everyone hated and now kind of people love. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting to me the way that as you say, you would expect it to be an Enzo, but then it's all the peculiar stuff that people really seem to love. And I wonder what that is. Is it because there's more discussion around it? Is it because it's not so daunting because it's just like some random English car from the 70s or a trailer, from the 50s? What is it about?
It's some of that, and I think it touches in that video you're talking about. First of all, he's probably the only person on the internet that has content around that topic. Right. So if you search, show me a Ferrari F40 video on YouTube, you'll get 7,000 results. But if you say I need an Austin Allegro restoration, you'll get like 2 videos. Right. It's that dude's video. So he kind of cracked the code a little bit in that. But I'd also say it's relatable. Like everybody has a story. This is something that came out of BaT in the early days. They really liked that my sort of taste and the kind of curation that I was doing at that time, even though the cars weren't ours and we weren't selling them. It was just curation of stories of listings that were out there in the universe. It was not it didn't have a bias towards rich guy stuff that people could never have touched, right? Like I've never driven a Testarossa. I don't even know what that would feel like. It'd be pretty crazy, but I've driven all kinds of Datsuns and Toyotas and Fords and Camaros and all this sort of stuff. So when you talk about that sort of stuff, people are like, oh yeah, my neighbor had one of those, or my creepy, uncle had one of those, or like my school teacher drove a Honda just like that. Right. And there's this electricity of that memory, and it's not nostalgia because you're not even longing for your teacher's Honda, but you associate that person in the school parking lot and the time you banged into it with your bike and blah blah blah, like stuff like that, which creates a connection. And I think that people appreciate it. Like when the example I always use is a Datsun 510. which is a funny, it's inexpensive little sedan that people turned into race cars and stuff. But a lot of people actually just drove them around back in the 70s and 80s. And they were
weirdly,
they were all over the place. And so people, you'd feature that, and I'd be like, oh wow, look at this really good Datsun 510 for sale in Sacramento for $12,000, and people would say, my aunt had one of those, and my neighbor had one of those. And I mean, the connection with a car like that, I actually think is really cool, and that's what a lot of the vibrancy around the discussion came from. It wasn't a bunch of, mechanics and experts at the beginning. It was more just people that related and associated with these sorts of cars. And then that climbed up the ladder, right? We started talking about Integrales. Like, I never touched one until yours showed up and drove off the truck, and now I own it. But before that, it was always, videos on Speed Vision of those things at the WRC
right.
and different stuff like that. So the different ways that there are so many models of cars that are highly relatable to people, even if they're not aspirational, they're relatable. And that's still to this day, you ask about, crummy LeBarons and CRXs and stuff on BAT. And it's important.
I actually love CRXs.
It's important that stuff is on BAT, because it's like those were everyman cars. But now everybody relates to them or likes that. See, you say you like CRXs. Some people probably didn't know that. I think that's cool. And when people like a variety of things, like it makes for a vibrant discussion.
Well, it's funny. It's kind of, the curation aspect of BAT is sort of it's like a symphony, and you need all these different notes to make this beautiful. God, this is going to end. The metaphor was good at the beginning, and then it's going to end in the shit pile now to make this beautiful music, Randy. But you kind of do, because and it would be amazing if you found like a, 12,000 mile LeBaron convertible from '92 with wood sides. I mean, that would go off the charts, because I think in a way, New York Bird song again. The relatable part, that and the way it connects to stories that you remember is the most important part of any car ownership.
I totally agree with that. The funny part about the symphony reference, though, is you wouldn't want to go to a symphony that had some of the notes we're playing in it, right? like sometimes it's just like a disaster. It's like it's like a project that's never going to come out. There's actually a 911 right now that's like basically the rusted shell Hulk of a 69 911E or whatever it is on Bring a Trailer right now. And people are like, you have got to be out of your mind to go for this, right? So that's kind of
so let me ask you this.
That's the violin playing in the second chair with the broken strings. And you're like, I don't know. I may want my ticket money back for this symphony. The BAT symphony is sometimes a little off key, but it is interesting. It will always be interesting.
Well, look, that imperfection is what makes it so great. I mean, you go to any other and in a way, I think that it's BAT is so human, right? And I think that is why it's so successful. Because when you look at real world auctions, they are all kind of shiny and perfect. They have these beautiful glossy brochures, and there's all this kind of. And what I find interesting, I find this fascinating about the vernacular of real world auction catalogs believed to be real, of their real mileage. They have all these. There's these kind of vague kind of suburban phrases. They're like, when by suburban I mean they're kind of in the neighborhood. They're adjacent to to you know what I mean?
Very adjacent. Very adjacent. It gets a little tricky.
Yeah.
You gotta watch out what you're saying on the Hagerty podcast network here, buddy. They bought into auctions, and it's a slippery slope. But I agree with you, and I think a lot of people say, some of that is just understood to be part of that business, but we wanted to do it differently. I mean, you look at our descriptions, they're very dry. We don't say, this will be an amazing one to add to your collection for ages to come, but that sort of stuff. It's just
a surefire investment. Yeah. Well, no, but the point is that you have the angry villagers who will say,
now you would be able to get that stuff. Before maybe you could have, but now if we changed our tune and said that stuff, people would be like, what have you done with Randy? You must have stuffed him in a closet somewhere, because he would never let you say that sort of stuff. And what's going on?
Well, precisely. Yeah, that's exactly right. You won't be allowed to say that kind of stuff. There is kind of. I mean, I've considered I'm considering there's a couple of cars I'm considering releasing from the nest. But then there's always this terror. I had a guy on the podcast a couple of months ago who's like a world famous watch collector. and I was wearing this very particular watch, and he was like, and he's this Italian chap. He's like, what is that? And he says, that's a Patek Beta 21. He has this most amazing voice. And all of a sudden I thought, oh shit, if anyone's going to know if there's something wrong with it, he will know. And he said, let me see it. And then for a minute I handed it over. I was like, oh no, he's going to see like something that I would never know that was wrong with it. So there is that kind of fear that you post your car out and so it goes, oh, hang on a minute. That bolt in the top right-hand corner of the engine, that's not factory.
Yeah,
but that's also what makes it successful.
Yeah. And honestly, it's what makes for happy customers, right? Like part of the problem of when cars get overfluffed is, does the guy that buys it, are they actually happy with it, or did they just get snookered into buying it based on some dream they were sold, right? So what we like to do is, I would rather have flaws be pointed out or be visible, and the person knows what they're getting. So it tends to go better in my experience. So that's sort of our philosophy. That doesn't need to be anybody else's philosophy, but that's sort of our philosophy.
Well, I think that's the best way to do business, because then you circumvent a whole lot of enraged and disappointed people at the end part of the process by having the angry villagers up front to point out all the flaws. I mean, you kind of want that.
Sometimes they're happy villagers, man. You keep calling
No, I know they are. I know.
I think it's probably like a 60-40 split, right? You got the guys with the ready to give you a beer, and then you got the guys with the pitchforks. So and it's
you're right.
That balance.
You're right, man. I mean, I by angry I mean happy, man.
Right.
That's what I meant. That was the English word for happy. I have this weird secret idea. I feel like it's actually more of an art piece than it is a car thing, but I kind of want to amass like a collection of Fiero-based Ferrari replicas.
Okay.
And then I want to drive to like Amelia Island and be totally outraged when I'm not allowed in the Cavallino section.
I love it. But this is the Bastardo, DNA. This is the broken.
That's right.
This is the broken bottle that you're going to be wielding as you show up. I support that sort of stuff. Yeah, I've done brainstorms with buddies over beers of like, it's Monterey week, but like let's do something counter to that, and start in Monterey and depart on the Wednesday and like go elsewhere and do go out into the desert and jump around in mud puddles in cars or whatever, to kind of do the polar opposite. But at the same time, I don't know, there's a different type of event for everybody.
One of the other things that I kind of regret is for a long time I sort of had this idea of making a collection of like tuner cars from all the kind of Koenig. Was it Koenig?
They would do Ferraris, they would do Porsches,
yeah. Like, I mean, and those things have gone crazy, haven't they?
Some of them are just so bizarre, that like a Gimbala Mercedes,
the Sbarro,
like Sbarro cars. There were some great tuners that came and went, and I'd love to have like a look at the books of those businesses from back in the 80s and how much of the money was legitimate and how much was not. Somebody should write a book on all of those and where they started, where they went, and like where the owners ended up or whatever. I have no idea, but some of those were pretty mind-bending in terms of their design and what they decided to do. And then there were some that were kind of mellower, right? I mean, the ones that got absorbed into manufacturers, the AMGs and the Alpinas of the world, that were just doing great stuff, but were a little more conservative, and it led to a longer, probably more positive outcome for them. But the extreme ones are fun to look at.
You don't think Porsche wanted to buy Strosek out?
I don't think Strosek had a long a business plan that was appealing. So, but in the moment when the wilder was the better in Miami or wherever people were assembling those cars and selling them, they people would throw money at them, and they obviously had their time.
Do you think that was the epicenter of those cars was Miami? I wonder where the most amount of those tuner cars ended up. I feel like it would have been Miami.
Miami was a stronghold. I don't really understand the whole sort of London supercar scene and stuff. You can talk about that. But some of them in car magazines back in the day, they were chasing like high speed numbers, right? Like that's what introduced me to Roof and some of the other guys, where they were trying to get on the cover at 211 miles an hour and whatever. And so that, Callaway, some of these more horsepower driven tuners. But
are you a horsepower geezer? I'm not really a horsepower geezer.
I don't really care. Again, I'm not setting lap times and doing crazy different stuff like that. But I like driving a 400 horsepower small block more than a 300 horsepower small block. I mean, I think it's cool, but I don't need 1,000 horsepower in some car or
Right.
these electric numbers. All these tests they're doing of drag races between the fastest electric cars. I don't really care.
Sure.
But I'm more into the sort of total overall driving experience. Horsepower is a part of that, but it's not all of it.
Are you against? What do you feel about electric stuff?
I think electric is cool. I'm glad that it exists. I'm not so certain that it's going to, save the world. All these narratives that are coming out now about how you're just kind of, you're not blowing soot into the air in your neighborhood. There's a mine in South America that is supporting your feel good attitude about your electric car in America. So, I mean, it's a tricky and a nuanced problem that it's trying to solve, but you can't dispute that it's very cool to have a car that's not idling at a stoplight and to have a car that, has instant top horsepower at 0 RPM.
Right.
And some of the dynamics around electric, the fact that a Ford F-150 can power your house in a power outage. I mean, like there are very cool aspects. So I'm in support of the sort of engineering challenge that they present and what they're doing, but I don't think they're going to save the world. And I think that car people for a while are going to have some sort of balance between gas cars and electric cars before it goes all electric.
I was wondering about that. Like, I feel like the world operates a little bit quicker than we think it does sometimes. So I wonder if there's going to be a point where suddenly the government or the world is going to say at large, you know what, that's it, no more gas-powered cars. But then what are we going to do with all our, with our Lancia Deltas and our Ford, Chrysler LeBarons and all that stuff? I mean, I will say that I really enjoy driving electric cars, but I wish that there was one that was aesthetically like amazing to look at. I actually think the Rimac's not that great to look at.
Yeah, I mean, many of them are not that great to look at for whatever reason. I don't know why that is. If people think that's just modernism or like things that need to look like they're electric when you see them sitting still, I mean, different sorts of.
But they don't look enough. They don't look enough like electric. Like I feel like the problem with electric cars is
I'm in the Bay Area and there's way too many Teslas here, but a Tesla Model S sedan still looks better than a lot of other hokey sedans that are out there. It's boring now, but it's I don't know. It's kind of Italianate and it's got okay taillights and it's like it's not that bad, right? So
no, I totally agree, man. I think the Model S is a really, really handsome, beautifully designed car. It's really nice. It's really well balanced. There's not really any bad lines on that car. And as you say, it's much more interesting than almost anything I'm just trying to think of anything else I've seen.
Yeah, but the new Mercedes electric cars are dopey looking, right? I mean, they're just you look at them and you're like, that's not what I want, right? And so you veer back and you're like, well, the Model S is like a 7 out of 10, so I guess I'll choose that, right? So it's just, I don't know, it's a funny world, and I don't know, this is just sort of more personal opinion than anything else when you get into design, but I just veer into trucks. I'm just like, just give me an F-150 Lightning or a Rivian and I'll call it good. I don't need all these other failed attempts.
The Rivian, I think, is really beautiful. The Rivian truck is super cool. I think the Rivian SUV, I have no interest in, but the truck, I think, I love the front. The front end of it is amazing looking.
Interesting. The front is the controversial part. That's interesting. You say the front. The front's the controversial part.
Yeah, because it's the most interesting part. Because they've kind of designed it like you would. They've branded it. Right, they've that entire look that's a Rivian brand look. Every time you see that, you know exactly what that car is. I would quite like to have a Cybertruck if it was really small. If they made a Cybertruck but a wagon version of that, I would sign up in a second.
Well, they're going to alter it from what everybody expected, right? That's what those guys do, is surprise people. So I think we'll see what comes out. It'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I guess so. So is there anything else you're hunting for? It's just always like 5 or 6 things on the list that you don't want to tell anyone, because if you told people, then they're gonna file the 16 valve for VW Golfs. Yeah,
I'm really lucky to have the stuff that I have already. I'm still hunting and always looking for. My second set of cars in high school was Shelby Mustangs. I think I will probably get into some sort of vintage Mustang. I have a 63 Falcon right now, which is a fun sort of nod to the Monte Carlo Rally and sort of a Euro-American smaller muscle car. But I really like Shelby Mustangs.
Is that a Falcon? I had a 74.
It's not an Aussie Falcon. No, you're talking different stuff. They,
Okay.
were early 60s and ran through the 60s, and they're specific USA models.
Okay. I had a 74 Ford Falcon when I lived in Australia. 3 on the tree.
Aussie Falcons are crazy, and there's actually a market for those. And every once in a while, those will trickle into the US, but they don't stir a lot of interest around here. They were never sold here, the Aussie market ones, and they're
Right.
sort of different 70s design, but they're cool. And down there, they were raced at Bathurst and
Sure.
crazy super V8 cars and interesting things that they did.
Do you know what a Ford Capri is?
Yes, we actually had those in the U.S. They were branded as Mercuries, unfortunately, but the
Really?
European ones with the V6s and the 2600s, the RS cars, all those. I mean, there are some very good versions of those, but in America, they don't have a ton of traction. You got to be pretty deep in the Ford motorsport world to care about those. But they raced at Spa and stuff, as you know. I mean, they did some big stuff back in the day.
I feel like you'd have to get up pretty early, really, to be able to out-reference Randy Nonnenberg on a car, to be able to produce some car that you'd never heard of. I feel like it's almost an impossibility at this point with you.
Man, 100,000 auctions later and 500,000 submissions or whatever. I mean, we've seen a lot of cars. I'm not that expert by any means. I mean, I just told you almost all that I know about Capris, like in 4 sentences, right?
But that's pretty good, man. That's pretty
good. I
good.
can make the reference, but after that, it runs out. And I know there's people that are super deep on every single model. So those people have me handily beat. But it's fun to talk about all the different dynamics.
You know what I saw the other day, which I really like, is a Toyota Serra.
Okay. Those are unusual with the weirdo doors.
You know, yeah, but those weirdo doors, allegedly, this is what I like. You know when a car is totally unknown, but there's one particular fact that maybe mythology, may not be, but is attached to that car, and the owner will like fall over himself to tell you that right away. So I was like, wow, this is really cool, these doors. And the guy was like, just so you know, these are the doors that inspired what's his face when he designed the McLaren F1.
Oh, wow, that's a big claim. That's a big claim.
I know it's a strong claim.
Yeah.
It's a strong
Unfortunately
claim.
for that Serra owner, Gordon Murray is still alive, so that can be disputed quickly. That claim will be said much more often after there's no one to dispute it who was there at the time. But it's
right.
always tricky when you're making claims about people who are still alive, because it can be refuted really, really quickly. Like guys like you with, I don't know, a couple phone calls, you're the Kevin Bacon game away from Gordon Murray. I bet you can get that answer actually in, I don't know, 36 hours. And
you know what, man?
That may be a problem.
That's actually genius. I would love to know if that's true, because it's such an obscure. It was a K car in Japan, and it's so obscure that the idea that there's this direct line from that car to Gordon Murray.
You think I'm texting my wife, but whenever we're talking about cars, I always search them on BaT so I can find if we've listed them or what they're going for or what the deal is. Wow, we've listed 5. No, I don't know why that got brought in there. 3. We listed 3 Toyota Serras on BaT.
What do they go for?
1995, 1990. Wow, they had a long production run. 2 1990s and a 95. One of them sold for $12,000. One of them sold for 11, and one sold for 5. So still a deal. There are still deals out there, man. Toyota Serras. Maybe our ticket to fame and fortune is buying up Toyota Serras. Let's see.
All right, man. Well, look, I feel like I've taken up a lot of your time. I will say, man, it's been such a joy finally talking to you after my ignoble, depressing,
man, I thought
crushing defeat.
It was great. I thought we were friends all this time. And
all the time I've been harboring rage, man, rage and resentment.
Man, I don't know what happened, where I went wrong, but I love the car. I still got the car, man, and we could drive that thing or come back and drive one of yours and do another podcast about it. It'd be fun.
I would love that, man, and I'm so glad you have it, man. And honestly, thanks again for taking the time to be on the show. I may be getting in touch with a couple of cars shortly, so
do it.
Maybe you could.
Operators are standing by at BaT all the time for the good stuff. You let us know what you got. We're ready.
All right. So thanks again, Randy, for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.